Love this quote, and it's actually from a song, Young Turks, believe it or not, Rod Stewart. We got just one shot at life. Let's take it while we're still not afraid, because life is so brief and time is a thief when you're undecided. And like a fistful of sand, it can slip right through your hands. So you can listen to the song again and hear where that comes in. I absolutely love this quote. And the first thing that I talk about when it comes to goals and to goal setting is obviously that there is a decision to be made about what your priority is going to be. You know, what is it that you're going to focus your efforts on? And um, the first tip that I will share with you is to decide how you'll decide. Many of my clients are very smart, very talented, very hardworking professionals, and they will get opportunities pitched to them. They will, run into people who will intrigue them with stories about, perhaps it's a company that they're starting, or perhaps it's something that they're working on. And there are lots of bright, shiny objects that are going to be thrown around. And I love the story of a client of mine who actually had three very different and each on their own really good opportunities thrown at her. Basically, she was working for a very large company that had offices around the world. She was sent abroad to turn around a struggling geography, and she did it under time, under budget. She exceeded all expectations. She really could write her own ticket at that point. And so they pitched her three different opportunities, one in a completely different area, one that was more of a cross-functional area, one that was more general management with a P&L. And depending on who I was counseling at this juncture, the fact that I was talking to Gia meant that we were looking at these three opportunities based on her lens, based on how she would decide. And luckily for her, because she looked at all three opportunities and she was like, wow, these are all really great. I don't know how I'm even going to pick through them. And I remember saying to her, oh, I think there's really only one, based on everything that we've talked about, that's relevant to you. And as we went through the conversation, it was the one where it was a general management role with a P&L, because that was her penultimate goal, was really around having that P&L, that direct accountability, that final decision-making ability. And again, all of the positions were senior, they were interesting, they were important to the company. It had nothing to do with that. And as I think to some of the other professionals I've worked with, if they had been offered some of the other roles, those other roles would actually be more relevant to them. But it's really about your own decision criteria. And luckily for Gia, she had that pretty well mapped out before she really had to make that decision, because sometimes you're so excited about something being pitched to you that you almost talk yourself into it. And so the first thing that I would suggest to folks, if you haven't thought of this already, decide how you'll decide as you look through your priorities for this year. Really start asking yourself, okay, why is this on my list? And why does that matter to me? And why does that matter to me? And really keep asking yourself why until you've confirmed for yourself that this is something that's really interesting to you. And as you're thinking about a career goal specifically, so in Gia's case, about that next step, there are many reasons why you might decide to make a career move. Compensation, growth prospects, the challenge of it, who you'll be working with, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to be a combination of these reasons, but let's face it, there are priorities and they will change throughout your career. When I was younger, I know for myself, and staring down the barrel of high student loans and trying to live on my own and support myself, compensation was huge. And it's not that it's not important now, but certainly at different times of my career, it was more or less important. So that's just one simple example. And for Gia, she was at that crossroads where she really needed to step into that position of senior leadership. And she really wanted it to be where she owns the P&L. So, okay, so let's say that you make a decision. Counterintuitively, don't tell anyone. And I think there are three people that you can tell. One is a mentor or a coach or someone that you know is on your side because they have been advising you this whole way. Yeah, when you get an idea and a notion, definitely tell that person. Two, a cheerleader, someone on your side. It could be, your best friend. It could be a former colleague, but someone who's just generally optimistic and always supportive, and someone who is going to, say yes to anything that you have to say without squashing your dreams right away, right? And then really the third person is, anyone, I would call this like a significant other, anyone who really, is going to be impacted by what you're doing and what you're thinking. Everybody else can wait. And the reason why I tell people to keep big moves to yourself is because, especially in the beginning, when you're just weighing what your options are, or perhaps you're weighing the direction that you're going to go, or the strategy that you're going to take, or a tactic that you're going to try, you're pretty raw and you're not very confident necessarily about it. And so not telling everyone really leaves a lot of your options open, and it really preserves confidentiality because, practically speaking, sometimes the best move turns out not to make a move, to stay exactly where you are, potentially to stay at your role a little bit longer. And I've had many, many clients. The world is very small. And so if you decide to stay where you are, you definitely want to have that option. I recently worked with a senior executive who had all sorts of plans and really, really was interested in doing something significantly different with his career. And he actually ended up doing that without at all changing his job. He got involved in his community's startup ecosystem. He got himself some advisory positions. He started mentoring some entrepreneurs. So he himself didn't go down that route. But in the beginning, it wasn't clear exactly what he was going to be doing. And so by really being very confidential and very quiet about what he was going to do or what he was thinking about, it really preserved all of his options. And as it turned out, he did make a big move for him emotionally and mentally. It definitely turns his career direction in a different place, but he's actually in exactly the same job as he was before. Run a pre-mortem. Notice here, I am still not running towards this goal. We're still at that decision-making phase, right? And so as you start thinking about your goals, what is going to be that best next move? Well, a post-mortem is when something has happened and you take it apart and you see, like, why did this happen? And what could we have done better? What went wrong if something went wrong? A pre-mortem is when you do that before the fact. And it's so important to do before the fact because, like I said, many times I'm working with very smart, very talented, very ambitious people who are very just naturally confident and optimistic, and will think that nothing necessarily can go wrong. And so it's helpful to just take a step and say, okay, if I project out 30 days, then 60 days, then 90 days, then 6 months, a year, year and a half, etc. If I am still looking at a success path, what is it that's happening that is supporting that? And what moves am I making that are keeping me on that path? Miriam is a great example of someone who is doing really, really well in her career and actually really loved where she worked. And I don't encourage people to go running and screaming from a job that they love. I certainly don't. But she wanted something bigger, and the company had given her a step up. But one thing that was on her decision list, right? So decide how you're going to decide. One thing that she really, really wanted in her life, in her career, was the chance to be a C-level chief marketing officer in her case for a global company. And for many of these large global companies, that is going to mean an international tour of duty. And, you know, she could have been in her geography. She doesn't have to go global. It's that she had said to me that she wanted to go global. And so as I am looking at her background, I am seeing she doesn't have this international tour of duty. It would be nice to do it now. She's unencumbered. She had a significant other, but he was excited about a potential move. He also was also in a point in his career where he could make that move and essentially let her take the lead for this time. What her company was offering her, and this was a company again that she loved and where she was doing really well, was something that was very domestically focused, because that's what the company was. They were domestically focused. They had no intention. They were a private company, privately held. They can do whatever they want. They had no intention of really expanding outward. And so even though she really liked what she was doing, as she did that pre-mortem and looked at where she wanted to go in her career and then reverse engineered that and said, okay, so what are all of these steps? She realized that it made more sense to make a move right now. And so she did that thoughtfully. She did that proactively. She did that amicably, but she still did it because it's sometimes not enough just to be happy and content where you are if you have designs of doing something else in the near future. Recognize that when you get to the mid to senior levels, certainly every move that you make, you have fewer and fewer moves after that. So you really have to start thinking about 2-3 moves ahead of you, and you can't just think about what's good for right now or what's maybe even the next best thing. You really need to start looking further, and I think a pre-mortem is a great way to do that.